Hey everybody, it's Meryl from the Cordial Eye. We're here with our regular self-care Saturday Facebook Live. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about boundaries. We're going to talk about boundaries this week and next week. But tonight we're going to talk about the different types of boundaries that we can have. Boundaries are such an important part of self-care. I know for anyone who tuned in last week, they saw Sarah talking about her forms of self-care and what works for her. And she mentioned that setting boundaries is a really important part of self-care for her. It's the same for me. It's really the same for anybody. Without good boundaries, we can't really have good self-care. So let's dive into boundaries. So we can have a lot of different categories of boundaries. We can have physical boundaries, which is what we allow people to do to or with our bodies, or what we use our bodies for. Time boundaries might be setting limits to what you'll give your time to. Like if you work 9 to 5, leaving work at 5 and not continuing to work after you're not getting paid, that's setting a time boundary. The same thing when people ask you to give up your time to do different activities or help them out with something, those are related to time boundaries. Saying yes sometimes might mean you have softer boundaries, and sometimes saying no means that you have firm, rigid boundaries, but sometimes it's just you having healthy boundaries and taking care of yourself. Emotional boundaries are another type of boundary. It's what we lend emotional energy to. The same thing with intellectual. It's what we're putting our intellect into. Professional boundaries can tie into work and what we're saying yes to at work, what we're saying no to at work. And material boundaries are related to our possessions. It's lending people our material belongings, giving people things that are ours. It's related to actual physical objects. So now that we've talked about the categories of boundaries, there are 3 different types that you can have. And this can apply to any of those categories. It can apply for how you do boundaries in general. But these are the 3 types: porous, rigid, and healthy. Now you can probably guess that healthy is the one that we want to strive for, but it's totally normal to have a mix of these. Porous boundaries, some people, like myself, will call spongy boundaries. That's why you see there's a little dirty sponge on this slide. Somebody who has porous boundaries is going to overshare personal information a lot. They might have a really hard time saying no to others. Maybe they're going to be over involved with other people's problems. Maybe they're dependent on the opinions of other people. They're more likely to accept abuse and disrespect. They fear rejection if they're not compliant. That is, if someone asks you to do something or tells you to do something, you're afraid to say no and not go along with them because you're scared that they won't want to be your friend anymore. Or if it's your partner, you might be afraid that they'll leave you. You're afraid of that rejection. And codependency, which also kind of sums up all of these points. It's having that codependency on other people and relying on their emotions and their behavior to set the tone of your own. So then we have rigid boundaries. I like to think of this as having a really strong, solid wall around you, an impenetrable wall with no door. There's no way to get through. These are people who avoid intimacy and close relationships. They struggle to ask for help. They have few close relationships. They're very protective over their personal information, and they may seem detached even with their romantic partners. They don't have that intimate connection with people. They keep others at a distance because they don't want to get hurt. They don't want to experience rejection. They're the type of person that you might call a human island. They're going to struggle to be a part of a team because they're afraid of asking for help and relying on people. So that's why we have this picture of the rock and the bricks, because I really think of it as like this solid, perfect person that's not letting anybody in. Now, last, we have healthy boundaries. This is what we really want to strive for. Healthy boundaries, you value your own opinions. You don't compromise your values for other people. You share personal information appropriately. You're not oversharing or undersharing with people. You know what your personal wants and needs are, and you can communicate those wants and needs to other people. You accept when other people say no. You're able to say no yourself without guilt. And you're independent, but you're able to ask for help and use support from other people. Now, it's important to remember that you are perfectly human. No one fits neatly into any one type. Most people are not going to have all healthy boundaries, even after working for a while on their boundaries. They're going to have a mix. So you can go back to those categories, and you'll probably see if you work on it for yourself that maybe in some areas, maybe in your physical boundaries, you're really rigid, but maybe emotionally, you're more spongy, you have more soft, fluid boundaries. And then maybe in some areas, like maybe in your time boundaries, you're really healthy. So, what I would recommend for you is to take some time to yourself and get out a journal or a piece of paper and write down those different categories. And you can come up with other categories too. You don't have to stick with the ones that we talked about tonight. Write down those different categories of boundaries. And then I want you to think about all of the criteria that we talked about and label each one and think about, in my physical life, am I soft with my boundaries? Am I flexible? Am I solid and firm? Do I have that wall around me? Or do I feel like my physical boundaries are healthy? And do that for each boundary category. And really think about if you're happy with how those boundaries are, or if you'd like to work to change them. And next week, we'll talk more about boundaries, and we're going to talk about how to set boundaries with people in our lives. And I always like to end with a quote. Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. Brené Brown said this. Now, I want to remind you that if you enjoyed this program and if you enjoy our other wonderful programming at the Cordial Eye, then please feel free to support us. You can do so by stopping by our website, thecordialeye.org/donate, and donating there. Any money donated helps support these programs and helps support the community. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a message or send the Cordial Eye a message, and we can get to them next time. Or you can also check out our But First Self-Care Facebook group with the Cordial Eye and ask questions there, and the community will help you figure out your self-care needs. All right, until next week at 8 p.m. on Saturday, be safe and be well, and we'll see you then. Thanks. Bye.